Hello, hello. We are hopefully live and we will try and get Instagram also live. And welcome, Yvonne. It's so nice to have you with me. And we were just talking about your backpacking experience in Greece a while ago, connecting Cornwall and Athens right now. And of course, you are here to not tell us about your backpacking, but actually, we want to showcase your incredible work around the world with global leaders, introducing New World Leadership trademarked. So while people are still joining, I'll share a little bit about Eudaimonia. So I have founded Eudaimonia on a mission to democratize human flourishing, and I coach ambitious professionals and entrepreneurs to decode their life's purpose and align it to their career. I introduced the Eudaimonia success model in 2018 globally as a TEDx speaker, and I am writing my book on how to access the eudaimonic state of mind. And August will be my month where I'm focusing to get it done. Eudaimonia, for those of you who don't know, and it's the first time that you're hearing about it, it is an ancient Greek paradigm for well-being that has been literally forgotten for over 2 millennia. And I think this needs to change, hence my work and my company's name to make that happen, because it's not just a philosophical term. For those of you who are philosophy graduates, you will know it. Therefore, today's conversation is going to be very relevant to eudaimons, the people who are on the eudaimonic path, as I call it, to self-actualization, and also leaders who are stepping up to really be purposeful, intentional, and impactful anywhere in the world when they have realized that this is, their time to step up and help their people also become self-actualized as well. And we're going to talk probably a little bit about that today. So on this live show, I showcase brilliant people like Yvonne Thompson, who bring a sprinkle, as I call, of eudaimonia into our lives. And she certainly does. You will hopefully see the connection without me talking too much about that. So it's time to introduce Yvonne. Yvonne Thompson is the founder and managing director of Change Innovators, working with clients globally for over 25 years as a leadership and organizational cultural specialist. She's known for her intuitive and highly progressive approach to change, resiliency, and being on the cutting edge of the new world. And we're going to talk about that. She has a master's degree from Royal Roads University and has taught in the Faculty of Business at 3 universities. Her passion is building alignment and a true sense of purpose that has life-changing results for the individual leader, their team, and their organization. So a very holistic approach, which we like at Eudaimonia. Together, we will unfold the fundamentals of New World Leadership trademarked and how she has been enabling leaders internationally to create unprecedented accountability within their cultures. So I could not be more excited. And the title of today's interview is New World Leadership TM, Strategies and Insights for Fostering the Next Generation of Global Leaders. Welcome, Yvonne.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Christina.
Thank you. So for the audience, if you're still joining, do not hesitate to ask questions at any point in this talk. We will pick it up when is relevant and when the right opportunity arises. So do put them in the chat or let us know in the comments, and then we will see it and we will share it accordingly when the time comes. So I wanted to set the scene for this talk and how we met with Yvonne. We met through Change Innovators, and I read her beautiful book called Creating the Accountability Culture, which we're going to share the links to if you want to find it. But I have to admit that for the first decade of my employed life, being in a career, being a consultant, doing change and organizational change at organizations, I really thought that more knowledge, more courses, more education was what I needed to succeed. And there was this endless need to keep learning more models, more things that I needed to acquire to put in my toolbox. And that's probably okay for someone at the beginning of their career. But what changed was when I started my own business and I became, as I call, a reluctant leader, because I really didn't have it all figured out. For sure, I probably don't have it still figured out. I try to employ every opportunity to apply my education. So from performance management to systems thinking, you name it, all the buzzwords that were relevant back then. But something was still missing, and it was inner work. It was what needed to really happen for me to flourish as a leader, and the crux of really what makes a great leader or not. And I'll ask a rhetorical question here. What truly makes a leader charismatic? And of course, we hear it: communication skills, intelligence, experience. But in my experience, this is not really what makes a charismatic leader. And until I read Yvonne's book, I I couldn't have put it in better words. And I was sharing that with her when we first met to prep for this talk, that really accountability is the thing that was missing. And I'm not talking about keeping others accountable as a leader. It's about the self-accountability that I needed to develop, and as a leader to create the culture of accountability. And Yvonne's book that I was reading is called Creating the Accountability Culture, the Science of Life-Changing Leadership. And this is exactly what we want to create today and what we want to discuss today. So if you're joining, let us know in the chat if you would like to achieve that for your team and your organization as a leader, to be able to create an accountability culture for your people and for your culture and for your organization holistically. Yvonne is the expert for that wholeheartedly. When I was reading her book, I was like, I wish I had the language to understand that and explain that. And I wish I learned that at university or all the other training courses, corporate training courses that I've ever done on leadership. So welcome. Long intro, but welcome, Yvonne.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's get started with a little bit of the basics. And I think you've got a way of describing organizations that haven't gone through that wave, through that change of understanding those concepts and being able to empower their leaders to bring that accountability culture into their organization. So how would you describe an old energy organization, as you call it in your book?
The old energy organization, I mean, many of the things that we've done since the Industrial Revolution are not scientifically based. They just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And there might have been some research papers done, but we really didn't understand much about what it was to be human 50 years ago, 70 years ago, even 40 years ago, compared to what we know today. And so many of the things that we followed were things like, we tell people what to do. We need to direct and plan. If you take a course at universities, it would be directing, planning, planning everybody, telling people what to do. And it works to a certain extent. But most of what we've done since the Industrial Revolution is carrot and stick. It's really about, we're going to reward for good behavior. We're going to have big consequences for bad behavior or for things that for performance that isn't right. Even things like feedback, giving feedback. There was, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on training leaders how to give good feedback. And in fact, feedback we know is very challenging in the best of times and in the best conditions. The science would indicate that. So an old energy organization is still really grounded in that old stuff. It's grounded in command and control. I'll tell you what to do. There's usually only a couple of people at the very top end making most of the decisions. And so it becomes challenging to really build creativity and innovation. You'll get the uniqueness from each of your contributors. Most people are kind of, sort of feeling a bit boxed in. And when we think in terms of being a human, that's not great for wonderful performance and for high brain function, optimal brain function. So that's what and typically the other characteristic of old energy is that there's usually an undercurrent of fear. So there's this element of fear around what we do, how we do it. If I do it wrong, what if I don't meet expectations? All of that sort of stuff. And fear is a really interesting emotion when it comes to performance. Very interesting how it plays out in the body.
Wow. I'm sure we can have a deep dive into that, but I love how you distilled it for us, the undercurrent of fear. And interesting, the least, I can probably use more modern terms as well, in terms of modern meaning what's fashionable nowadays, to talk about toxic culture, to talk about burnouts, and there's so many things that can lead themselves back to fear when we do the work with leaders in terms of why they're behaving and how they're behaving in an old energy organization. And to just juxtapose it then with the old energy organization that you just spoke to us about, what would be the noticeable characteristics, the step changes that you notice when an organization has entered the new era, the new world leadership, when it has leaders that understand and can practice the principles that we will talk about in a little while? So new energy organization, how does that look like?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to recognize is that New World leadership is not about a destination. It's really the journey, right? It's about understanding that it's an ongoing practice. So it's not a finish line. And, I myself am still on that journey, right? So I'm certainly not an expert in it. But what we do know is that it's organizations that have decided they really want to understand the human condition. They really want to understand what it is to be human. They really want to have a good handle on positive psychology and what are all the components of that and how do we use that. They want to understand what the threat response is and how easy that threat response is when we're working in communities of organizations where there's always deliverables and performance requirements, and people are on their game all the time because they want to do, by nature we want to do a good job. So new energy organizations are not afraid to put that big toe into the water and say, we know it's not going to be comfortable, we know it's going to be tough, but we're going to do it. And I think that what we're really conscious of with this concept is that this is not a new program. This is not the flavor of the month. Things are changing, so we need to do that. This is a long-term commitment of exploring your teams, your people, and of course, at the very beginning, you yourself as the leader. And there's a significant amount of work that goes into really understanding, how do I show up at work? So organizations that are beginning to dabble in that are saying, we want to give our leaders a really good opportunity to understand who they are, how they show up at work, what their greatest gifts are, what are some of their opportunities, how do people feel when they leave a room? They ask those really hard questions. And that's the very beginning. That's just the very early stages of a new energy organization.
Wow. And as you were speaking, I am thinking of how many of my clients stress about reorgs when the teams get rejigged, because especially when you have found a good leader to be able to showcase your gifts, and they see you and they hear you, and then when that changes, creates so much havoc internally for employees, for the teams, and so on. And organizations need to keep changing, they need to keep evolving, but being able to recreate that balance quite quickly by asking those hard questions is quite an important leadership skill. And it doesn't have to be just coming from the leaders, but also from the people below, if they know how the game needs to be played, if those principles are taught, are shared, and therefore anyone can step up to allow that to unfold. Thank you for that.
And maybe what I'll just add in, Christina, is that new energy organizations are on that pathway of grounding their culture in love. And that is a big word, and it's thrown around a lot, but I think people don't actually understand what it is in the context of work. And I think that's a really important part of it, right? And so when you talk about those big changes and those reorgs, if you have a culture that's grounded in compassion and kindness and love, those reorgs are not difficult. It's just that most of our cultures are not, and we don't share enough information, and we don't include all the people that, in most cases, we don't include all the people that need to be involved.
Yeah. Wow. I want to ask about love and compassion in culture, and how do you and we're going off piste here, how do you teach, or how do you enable a leader to understand? Because you talk about all of the organizations having an undercurrent of fear, whether it's spoken about, known, or conscious, I don't know, but it's definitely there for somebody who's trained to be able to see it. And of course, the difference, the day and night, is the new energy organization that's actually consciously grounded, as you said, in love. Words that, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would be afraid to even conceive, let alone I wouldn't even look for at work. I wasn't there to make friends. I wasn't there to find those things in my
Right.
work. But you are daring to say them. So please.
Well, we are capable. We're human beings. We are capable of love. And, it's interesting, but 25 years ago, one of my first presentations, and I was talking to a group of CEOs about love and compassion in the workplace. And, their eyes kind of rolled in the back of their head and they were like, okay, she's never going to make it. Like, this is never going to, because we don't need it. It's not what we're here for. We're here for performance and profits and bottom line and getting people to do what we want them to do. And that's okay. When you have a goal and you have a mission and you have an ingrained purpose of who you are, you just stick with it. And we just stuck with it. I stuck with it knowing that this was going to be really difficult. But when we think in terms of, and of course now it's come into, into trend and favor. We've been doing it for 25 years. I find it actually kind of humorous. I find it really humorous, that, some of the, I find it very humorous. But I think the key for us, and for our team and for myself, is that what we've done is we've taught leaders skills. So you need to say the right thing and you need to think the right thing. What we haven't done is spend time with leaders to have them understand what is the energy, what is the unspoken message you are giving the other person. So, for example, we can have all the skills in the world to say, these are the words I need to use, and I have to plan the conversation. There's a lot of instruction in many leadership courses about coaching and how to have a good coaching, ask lots of questions. But if I'm ticked off at you, if I'm unhappy with you, and I haven't dealt with the story in my head about you, it doesn't matter how great my questions are. It doesn't matter the perfect words I use. The energy in that conversation is going to tell the other person, I'm annoyed at you. And I actually don't really want to hear from you. What I really want you to do is hear from me. And I want you to go away and do what I tell you to do. So understanding that we are energy beings, that we are not just, mental, we are incredibly rational beings. It's incredibly important to use our rational mind. But we are also heart-centered, we are also spiritual beings, and we know that there's energy in the quantum field that we are exchanging with people all the time. So how I make someone feel is actually what matters. And a lot of that doesn't come from the words. The words are important, but it's actually how I show up. So if I show up and I really want to hear from you, I really want to know what it's like for you to work here. I really want to know why your performance is poor, like what's going on for you, because poor performance is an indication of unhappiness or a lack of a skill, but we assume that we know what's going on for the other person, and we never can. We never can. So our role as leaders is to create a really kind, caring environment in which we can have a meaningful conversation. So I can learn from you. I need to learn from you, because when I learn from you, then I know how I can maybe ask a good question that's meaningful, as opposed to planning everything in advance and saying all the right words.
Yeah.
It's how I make someone feel. And that's the critical part for a leader. How do we make them feel when we're having that conversation?
And it is literally, that translates to the undercurrent of love, knowing that no matter how I perform, no matter what is happening in my life, somebody will hear me. I think that could be transformational. You're right. We are stuck in our stories, most of us, when we go to work, and we make assumptions about others, and that bridge is never crossed. And actually, that's because of fear. Whereas if we have a culture grounded and we have rituals where we know how to open each other's doors, how many times we need to knock in order to open each other's doors, then at least, we have indicated where the door is. It doesn't have to be constantly a free flow of people, but, we have ways in which we can access that part within our heart.
And
Beautiful
staying
example.
out of judgment is absolutely critical, right? It doesn't matter what anyone tells us when we're working with them. Staying out of judgment is huge
Hmm.
because we don't know. We don't know what's in someone's pot of soup, and it's not our place to know. Our place is to just really create that opportunity for people to go on their own journey. And,
Hmm.
the leadership journey is unique for every single leader. And that's the piece I think that's really important, is that organizations recognizing that cookie cutter, these are the competencies we want to cover. And that's important, but it's really essential to recognize that each leader is going to have a unique journey. If the leadership program is really designed well, there's going to be a safe space for them to go on their own unique journey and figure out what they need to work on.
Yeah, because it's not the same things that somebody needs to learn in
Oh,
order to become a great leader. Different characteristics, different gifts.
totally,
You
totally different.
for that. And I think that's something that really struck me in your book, where you don't talk about the skill sets, and we're going to go into that in a moment, but you consistently talk about the energy, the awareness, the consciousness, instead of skills on how to be powerful as a leader, how to have authority, how to be heard, how to influence. You don't use these words. And it was quite striking because, let me tell you, mainly the books that I have come across while I was at university, admittedly, a couple of decades ago, were all about this wording, as you said, the control and command type of, education around leadership. So, how does this relate to our ability to lead as new world leaders? You talk about being able to be aware, to understand the energy, consciousness, even, and I welcome that. But I think it would be useful to give us a little bit of a intro in terms of, okay, how does that, these are new words, I guess, for an average person who's in their 40s in leadership positions right now.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It's a foreign concept for sure. I mean, when I'm working with CEOs and we're just starting to have early conversations about leadership development for their teams, one of the things I always say is, we're going to ask your leaders to slow down, and they go, "What?" Like, the thing about it is that I'll remember what I said about old energy organizations. A lot of what we've done since the Industrial Revolution was not scientifically based, meaning that running really fast, overloading people's plates, having way more, like having 12 hours of work to do in, a reasonable 7.5 or 8 hour day, is all counterintuitive and counterproductive to how the brain works and how the human works. So understanding how the brain works, bringing in lots of good brain science, making sure that people actually have the science as well as the intuitive side around how does that make me feel. These are all really, really critical. It's sort of this beautiful dance between, the rational mind and the heart center and the gut, right? Because they're all communicating all the time in the bidirectional highway. So making
Mhm,
sure that we provide good science alongside the allowing the leaders, giving the leaders a safe space to figure it out what's going on inside themselves. And it's a journey. It's not a we don't do events. We don't bring people into hotel rooms for 4 days straight and teach them how to be a great leader. Like, we'd never do that. Like, it doesn't work. It's never worked. It doesn't. I mean, this is about an ongoing commitment of communication and working. And the leader does all the work. We just create the environment. I mean, they do all the work.
and it's beautiful because that's exactly what you help leaders do at work.
Yes.
Create the environment for the teams, for the people to be able to perform within that and feel safe. And there's a way of doing that, and you have that. So would you mind then sharing a little bit about the journey of the consciousness of how you take people? And I know it's not the skills, it's not, but literally you're creating space for people to have these realizations at their own time, in their own sequence. It doesn't have to be, but actually you create that space. So if you could share with me a little bit about the journey of how leaders move on from making assumptions about others, never asking any questions, never, to actually, becoming a new world leader. to create new energy organizations.
Yeah. So the process is just as important as the content. We're really particular about our process. So our, we have our premier, New World Leadership that we've been doing for a long time. It changes every 18 months because we're always adding in the newest science. But the fundamental process has not changed. It's held over 12 months. So anywhere between 11 and 12 months, there are 12 specific modules dealing with very specific things. We work in a group cohort, so people really get to know the other people in their cohort. And we do work with intact teams, but we also have public offerings where we have people from different organizations. So there's options and choices as to how you come in. But the whole first sort of 3-4 months is really about me, the leader. This is about unpacking what does the science tell us? What do you already know about yourself? What's that reflection? We use lots of, different psychometric assessments, but always guided with a coach. So the thing that's also about good leadership development is one-on-one coaching is always part of it, because not every conversation is for the group cohort. Some conversations just need to happen privately and in a confidential setting. So all throughout, there's sort of a module of group learning that's got in both science and good information, lots of sourcing, lots of resources. And then there's a month between module 1 and module 2, and there's some homework and there's some reflection and we want you to experience, we want you to try different things. We want you to come back and report what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And of course, there's coaching in between each module. So it's a very, it's very structured for a reason. And it's a slow drip of content, reflection, practice, content, reflection, practice, lots of conversations, both in the cohorts and the breakout groups, but then private conversations with the coach. And, it's everyone comes to it in different ways. We have leaders who, at the very end, we have a session where they do a presentation back about their journey. And I've worked with leaders where I thought, okay, they came to every class, they were here, they did all the work, but I'm just not sure that they're shifting, they're trying new things. They blow me away in a presentation. Like, they literally I can't believe I'm doing this different and this different. They were just really quiet in class, and we respect that, right? But boy, put them up in front and, they share. So for us, that's it. Sometimes it's month 5 and we do an EQ and we have a private conversation, and you can see this light bulb moment where the person goes, okay. Sometimes it's a leader in a class who says something and 4 other leaders think, oh my goodness, that's me. And that's what you did and it worked. I'm going to go try that. It's not even us. They're learning from each other. So it's, and I think the coolest part is, as leaders start to go down this journey and do this work, it's so interesting to watch how they create an environment for their team members, and they give permission to their team members to actually be who they really authentically are, because they're just for the first time starting to uncover who they authentically are. And once they start to come into that, they automatically sort of radiate that out. They don't have to practice influence. It's people say, what's going on with John? Because he's so different, and he asks me questions, and I sense he actually cares about me. It's so cool. I can't wait for my next chat with John, and it's and for them, it's a new way of their leader being. And we hear that all the time, not once in a while, all the time. It's we're very blessed in that regard.
And thank you for sharing the process and how you take people on a journey. And what really struck me was not just content and crush it into a day and take people in hotel rooms, but actually giving people the space to reflect, to process these things for themselves and go practice. And actually that group learning is very powerful, because most of my clients who are in leadership positions share always that comment, you feel so lonely. I'm firefighting on my own up here, and I don't feel I've got peers that I can share my failures, my, hard moments, my, being able to provide that space to have a league almost of leaders who are sharing shoulder to shoulder, where they're not competing directly, but actually they're supporting each other, is also a yet another massive, advantage of what you are offering for leaders, because it's not just the one-to-one that can make shifts. Of course, there needs to be a space and time for that as well, for the coaching, the one-to-one coaching, which is bespoke and specific for their journey. But I think the ability to be able to rub shoulders with other leaders who are fighting the same, fights, they have the same struggles and also the same victories within their organizations in different industries, can share so much camaraderie, I think, around that. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, I completely see how you change the narrative and the language people use, from skills and what I need to know and follow this so that it works. And that you speak in your book about the detachment is not disengagement, is being able to detach from, is it going to work? Then only I'm going to do it, to actually giving space and permission for others to be in my space and do it together, so that we can all own it and be accountable for the results. I love that.
One of the things I could maybe add on accountability that might be relevant for viewers, and that is that, we'll often ask leaders, like, how many of you feel responsible for the performance and behavior of the people on your team? And, all the hands go up. And we say, well, what's that about? Like, can you actually be accountable and responsible for the behavior and performance of other people? And
Great question.
and they can't. They just can't. I mean, it's an oxymoron. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Again, not scientifically based at all, but that's what I'm going to hold you accountable and you're going to do it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing. The more important thing for us to reflect on is, if the leader's holding on to responsibility and accountability, there's no reason for anyone on the team to take it. They don't need to. Now, they don't have those conversations, but subconsciously, contributors on the team know, like, the bosses respond, like, and everything pushes up, right? This is about creating cultures where individuals, we say, the number one most important skill of a leader is to create an environment where each and every contributor wants and does take full responsibility and accountability for the outcomes they get and how they show up. That's their job. And if they do that job, the rest all takes care of itself. But that's a skill set, and it's a real rewiring of the brain and the way that we show up as leaders, because we cannot use the old methods and try to get different results. It just won't work.
It won't work. And I can say from my experience personally, it hasn't worked, but also a lot of my clients do share the same guilt of, I am responsible. I feel responsible for everyone's, performance. And they take it on, and it's heavy, and it's lonely, and it's not.
It's not right. It doesn't work anyway.
Crush. And then who wants a leader who's absolutely stressed to their eyeballs and cannot be there for themselves as leaders, let alone for the others in the team? And I call this the Atlas effect. They hold everything upon their shoulders, but this is not fair on the leader, but not fair on the others as well, because then the leader is never there for them.
Do you know how often we rob people of their own experiences, and we rob people from decision making? We rob people from that accountability, and we don't do it intentionally. This is the piece that's really important. This is unintentional cultures. We all have these many companies have accidental cultures. And it's okay. It's okay. We created environments where the victim mentality can thrive, because if we take responsibility and accountability away and it's always with the leader, people say, well, I'll just do what I'm told. I've got an opinion, but I'm not going to share it. It's just, and I know that I exaggerate to make a point, and I know that most organizations are somewhere in the middle of, on this journey, but there's a lot of work we can do to improve the way that we build teams and build performance. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And I want to share the levels of consciousness as you describe it, because I think it is relevant. You mentioned about how, people are normally stuck in a victim mentality because of the accidental culture of a leader who tries to save their team and save their organization and hold on to all the responsibility for all the team members, to actually moving into a more doing mentality of understanding that they can do it together. If I'm explaining it correctly, and I think it would be probably better if you do explain the rest of it for us, but actually leading all the way to the being mentality.
Well, I think the key with this model is to give people an opportunity to kind of, first of all, recognize we all have sat in all of them at some point, and it's okay. And we can be in that very fluid, in the flow, where the brain is functioning really well, and then something happens and we dip right down into the victim mentality. It's okay, it's going to happen. The key is, do we have really good tools to bring ourselves back up into that fluid moment? So the victim mentality, what's important is we have to recognize that we have created cultures where this mentality can thrive. And it's very accidental. It's not what we planned, but it's what we did in many organizations. I also think it's important to recognize the research shows we don't just think victim, but we feel victim. People that actually feel like they don't have any autonomy, they don't have control over their jobs or their lives at work. They feel it like it's inside. So we have to remember that it isn't just the way they show up, but they're feeling it. And so understanding that there's lots of work to do to help change how a person feels. And that means the leader changes the environment so that the person starts to feel safe.
Mm.
Most supervisors and managers sit in the doing mentality. And the thing with the victim mentality is if it's strong, they don't take any responsibility. Life kind of happens to them. They're not part of the creating their own outcomes. In the doing mentality, someone's got a list, and I always say, how long's your list, and what happens when you get to the end of it? And leaders say, well, I never get to the end of the list because by the time I get close, there's 10 more things on the list. Well, the thing about it is it better than the victim mentality and more productive and better brain function? Sure, absolutely. But the problem is that we don't actually ever feel like we finished. We don't celebrate the successes. We just add things to the list. This is not good for the human psyche. We need to actually slow down. We need to um, celebrate accomplishments. We need to make sure that list does get done, that we don't feel like someone's always adding 10 more things. The fluid mentality, we can all appreciate. We've had moments where we're in the zone, we're doing something we love, time just flies by. And I've got lots of examples in my coaching work. And I'll say, tell me when that is for you. Like when, that's when everything is going really well, right? You and your partner are getting on really well. The kids are doing great. You're loving the weather. Things are feeling good. Maybe you bought the house you really love. It might mean that you're actually doing something that's really creative that you love. And you look up, and the only reason you looked at the time was because you were hungry. 3 hours has gone by. That's when the brain is really in that creative mode and functioning really well. And that can be anything. It can be crafts and things that are really creative, but it can be at work. Lots of people will describe being in the flow at work. And the being mentality, not many of us spend much time there, but this is really where that more mindfulness, there's a very quiet energy. I think it's really important. Great coaches know how to set a context of being extremely present. They are only there for the client and no other reason. And the being mentality is being able to really surrender into what is going on without a lot of emotional reaction. So this is where there's a lot of emotional regulation. There's a lot of heart-brain coherence. There's a lot of coherence within the nervous system. So the heart, the nervous system itself, and the brain are all in a coherent state. And you get a phenomenal brain function here.
Yeah,
But it is a
without
quiet, it is a
clarity.
quieter energy.
Hmm.
It's
Thank
not
you
a
yeah, describing it in this way. And I can definitely think for myself. I go through all of the levels of consciousness for sure within a day. And the being mentality definitely resonates when I'm there. I can definitely, especially because I am a coach on my day job, when I surrender to what is going on without my own narrative, and that place of coherence, and add the integrity part of things in there. Certainly, when the narrative doesn't have to be yours, then there's quicker solutions being created as well, for problems that arise when we don't box them, when we don't blame, when we don't go into the victim mentality, for sure. That was a beautiful explanation. Thank you very much. And I think we can definitely create a shorter version of this episode to share it out there. And I think that's going to resonate with a lot of the leaders out there. Thank you, Yvonne. So the most, I think, anticipated part of our interview today and our show is the accountability model that you have created. And I was fascinated by it. And of course, looking back when I was younger, I had no idea how to create accountability within myself, let alone within my teams and my businesses. And now that I run different businesses along with my business partners, every team, every group has a different dynamic. And of course, my all good self, will be thinking, yeah, I can do a cookie cutter approach and I can just manage all of that in this way. Guess what? It hasn't worked. And of course, I didn't have the language for that for a long time until I read your book. I really want to ask you to guide us through the accountability model, the way that you share it in your book, but also perhaps a quicker version of how you explain it to the leaders, because I think it will make a huge difference in how people treat accountability, understand accountability, the way you have described it earlier, but also how they will implement it going on first on themselves and then towards the space they are creating. So perhaps I can use that diagram as well, if that's helpful.
So you've asked a question that's really hard to answer, and I'll tell you why. Because it takes us 8 months with spending with leaders for leaders to get comfortable even practicing it. But it is a journey, and we start at about month 3 is where this gets introduced, module 3 where it gets introduced, and then we bring it up in every class moving forward for the next 9-10 months after that. The foundation of the model is really about if we want to change something out there, right, we have to change something in here. It's absolutely absurd. We always think, well, if only you would be different, then my life would be better. If only you would change, then things would be better.
Easy to say that, isn't it? But it doesn't work anyway. So,
and it's so true. We all do it. We all do it. So the thing is, and we do it so subtly, like I exaggerate again to make a point, but it's very subtle. It's in through everything we do. So the key is recognizing that if I want a different result, I need to do things differently. And so I have to be prepared to do that inner work before I ever end up in a place where I'm doing coaching with other people. Because if I want to change my energy, if I want to look at people differently, I have to change how I truly feel about them, because they'll feel what I think about them, if that makes any sense. So the key here is everything starts with becoming the observer. We take a 10,000-foot view of who I am. I take a 10,000-foot view of how I feel, what I'm thinking about. Why do I get triggered in that moment? Somebody said something and whoof, I've got an emotional reaction. I'm not regulating very well. Why? What is that about? Yeah. And so observing how I think and feel in any given moment is really critical for leaders. It takes time and it takes a willingness. It's really holding up a mirror to myself and doing that inner work myself. And you're doing it alongside other people that are doing their own work. So it all becomes kind of okay. And it becomes a little bit, you'll hear colleagues talking about it and joking, and we hear people in the class saying, oh yeah, that was me last week, whoops, kind of thing. So part of that, and the thing that's also important about the model is it looks really linear, but it's not. This can go any way. You can move back and forth. I mean, it really is about working with what you need to work with in the moment. But it's demonstrated this way in order to have a starting place for people. So becoming the observer, first of all, is really critical. Non-judgment is about recognizing that we got to start managing that little voice in our head, that judger up there that's got a story about everybody. And the simplest way that we do that with leaders is we ask them, how much do the people you work with really know the real you and the inside? That your intimate thoughts, your baggage, your stuff. How many people at work really know the inner you? And the answer is like, not very much. They might know like this much. They don't know very much. So why do you think you know anything about the people you work with? And yet we make these assumptions all the time based on a small amount of behavior. So managing those judgments, what's the story in my head? And we have to ask that all the time. What's the story in my head? Can I get that story? And can I let that story go? And we ask simple questions. Do I have all the information? The answer is always going to be no, because you've only got your perspective. You might have two other people's perspective, but you don't have,
Of course.
So recognizing you don't have all the information is really critical. Accepting exactly where you're at with any situation or person, really true acceptance. Now, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. I don't have to agree with what you did or what happened, but I need to accept it and be okay with it, right? Because I can't move forward if I'm trying to change it and push boulders. And, often leaders spend hours and hours trying to change things that are not within their control.
Yeah.
So really accepting that, let's say if we use the example of someone who's really struggling at work, just accepting that's where they're at. And that there's probably a story behind the story. There's probably something going on that is creating that. And then I need to decide what my intentions are. And this one is really hard. I think people think this one's really easy. Oh, I really care about the person. I have their best intentions. Well, you can never have the best intentions of another person. That's a fallacy as well. Only they can. Only they get to decide. You don't get to decide. For your kids, by the way, you don't get to decide. You don't get to. We think we do, but we don't.
Yeah.
So really getting comfortable about what's my intention. Because if your intention when you go into a meeting is to improve someone's performance, good luck with that. Like, it's not going to work. But if your intention is to learn from that person, that they have a story to tell me, they have information to tell me, and I'm going to be really quiet and learn from them, and I'm going to have really good questions. As I listen, I'm going to work on forming really good questions. So really getting comfortable with what that real intention is. And one of the things we would say is honesty. The big version of it is honesty before kindness always. And then we change it slightly, and it's honesty with good intentions. I've really done a lot of work on my intentions equals kindness. I can be really honest with someone if I care enough.
Yeah.
And they have to feel that I care, and it has to be genuine and it has to be authentic. This is not pretend. So there's a lot of work I have to do as a leader to get there.
Yeah. And that translates into energy, I presume, and the ability
to absolutely
never dies, as you demonstrated.
This is where the energy piece comes in, right? And then I got to detach. I gotta say, wait a second, it's not mine. It's someone else's. It's someone else's. I'm not responsible for the performance and behavior of another person. I am responsible for creating an amazing environment where they can own it.
Wow.
But I am not responsible for the results they get. But I am responsible for the environment. So if I'm not creating the right environment, I got to go back inside and do my work. But I have to detach and know it's theirs, because the power in detachment is unbelievable. I care so much that I will detach and let you own it. I'm not going to own it for you.
Yeah. Wow.
And when I've done all that work, I might be ready to do a little bit of coaching and help people step into their own self-responsibility.
Wow. So I'm just amazed at how you explained it, and imagining wildly how different people would feel at work, especially when they're having those conversations, those dreaded sometimes performance management conversations where the expectations of the employees are, I exceeded, and then the manager has to bring the bad news that maybe not. And, those discrepancies and how neither side, and of course, we know which side wins to an extent, because the grounding of the new world leadership, the accountability model, is not explained, is not owned, is not practiced in those cultures. And how the conversations would be so different, not just these conversations, but imagine really having a company, go through a positioning situation, different market forces changing, the direction in which the strategy needs to go at very short notice. Imagine those conversations when this model is being practiced. And of course, I interrupted you very quickly without letting you go into the self accountability, which is, I presume, the result.
Yeah, it's just those are the results, right? It's ongoing. It's not a tick a box, we did it. It is not. Because you can be in a meeting with someone and it goes in a completely different direction, and you've got to ground yourself, take a deep breath, put your feet on the floor, regulate your emotions, use coherent breathing techniques. It's really, really critical that you have a lot of tools, and that's part of what we do. Is we provide a lot of, but really practical using tools. They're not intellectual tools. They're tools about how do I regulate my nervous system and my emotions. How do I know when my prefrontal cortex has been hijacked by my limbic system, or by my reptilian brain? I mean, all that language comes in, all the science, all of the information that we can provide in the context of our time together comes into the program in order to help people. So it's a real combination of working on
Neuroscience.
myself,
Yeah.
science, and who I am as a human.
Yeah. And it's not about denying all of that by saying self-regulating. I'm just clarifying. It's not about saying, okay, well, I'm denying this. It's about being able to own this story, perhaps even go into the table and say, this is how I feel about this. But I know there's also your side of things, and I want to hear about that genuinely. But being able to do that
This is
is so.
never, yeah, it's never going to be about suppressing emotion. But if I if I don't have tools to recognize that I'm being hijacked, I'm in big trouble.
Yeah.
Because now I'm on autopilot and I'm
Yeah.
just going through saying what I feel like saying, doing what I want to do, and everyone feels that around me. So it really is about building the awareness of, oh, I just got triggered. But here's the thing about it. We can't tap into that. We can't tap into our intuition. It's difficult to tap into our gut feel, and it's difficult to actually be able to feel that trigger coming on if we're running at breakneck speed with 15 hours of work to do. So this practice of, and it's funny because productivity actually goes up when leaders do this. There's less conflict. People are actually at their desks working, like people are at home getting stuff done, because there isn't the friction and the problems and the conflict. But it's a journey to get there. The transition from old to new is a true transition, and it takes a bit of time.
Yes, it does. And I have seen the most efficient, people at work, and I'm going to be a bit, our mothers, because they have so many other things to do, and they actually literally have 8 hours to get it all done at work, and they get it done. It's amazing. And kudos to all the mothers out there who are working and raising a family and making sure everything is running, and being able to regulate during that time and not let all the drama happen at work, and at home, is important. And we're talking about mental health here, mental health for leaders. And I loved your definition of honesty as well, which I'm sure we will, share again in a smaller clip. I think it will be amazing for people to learn some of this language. And even from the very quick explanation of the accountability model, I do believe that a lot of our viewers will take a lot to be able to take to their work, if they start practicing it. And of course, a little bit of a deeper question here for you personally, Yvonne. What got you into this work? Because I'm curious, because I think it didn't just come about accidentally, maybe has, but this is life-changing work and life-changing science, as you say, because it was important for you to probably put the science aside to what really works for leaders and simplify their work and actually allow them to be happy at work. Shall I use a cheesy term?
Yeah.
um, got you into this work, this amazing work.
Yeah. So I'm a late bloomer. I worked in the corporate world for 20 years. I saw a lot of pain. I saw a lot of pain. And I was a workaholic myself. My kids were in daycare. We had a nanny at some points because I worked so much. I was very successful. I got promoted and promoted, and I was the only woman at the manager's table.
Mhm.
Um, and I saw a lot of pain. I saw a lot of hurt. And one day I was sent on a leadership course. The whole company, everyone was going on this leadership course. And I walked away, and about a month later, and it was really great. Like, it was a fabulous kudos to the people that did it. And the company was going down this path. We were going to do this. It was 4 days in a very expensive hotel, blah, blah, blah. We were going to do this. And about a month later, when I suggested that we put into practice one of the things in the course, that was like, no, we don't have time to do that. Just get that done. And I just was just crushed. I was crushed. And I knew at that moment that was my calling. I had just seen so much pain and 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 lack of performance, because people are nervous. They're worried all the time about their jobs, and am I going to meet my ROIs, and is my KPI, like, my KPIs, I've got this list of KPIs, and so um I left my employment, went back to school, started my business. And the accountability model did not come for about 5 years after, 6 years after. And that was really based on, I was going through a really difficult personal time with my kids. And at the same time, going through a really difficult time with the business, because we were growing and expanding and things were changing. And I had to dig deep. Like, I had to dig really deep. We talk about mental health, we talk about depression, we talk about suicide. Like, I had to dig really deep. And that required me to read a ton. And I was not regulating my emotions well. My marriage was on the verge of falling apart because I was distraught about my children. And I had to dig really deep, and it was a long journey, and that journey has not ended. I mean, being a parent is a lifetime commitment. It's a very hard and often thankless job. It is. I wouldn't change anything. I've learned so much from my kids. I've learned so much from my partner, and I've learned so much from the people I work with at Change Innovators. And I am grateful to all of them, and I continue to learn from them. So the accountability model came over a period of years of research and reading and knowing and seeing what worked. And then eventually it just kind of was, that's it. That's what we're staying with. And we've had the same model for over 10 years and have seen the results over and over and over again. And as long as we just keep bringing more love and more compassion into the work we do, the results speak for themselves. It's a labor of love for sure.
It definitely and certainly sounds like one. And thank you for sharing that part. And, behind every piece of work that's deep and profound, there is a story. And I'm glad I asked this question, even though you had to share parts perhaps that maybe you haven't shared publicly before. Thank you for doing that. And this is how Change Innovators came about, and the accountability model, of course, and the terms New World Leadership, because I certainly have not met a lot of coaches talk about, love and compassion. When I was learning about coaching, it was a private conversation that was only for friends and people who we love, and there was a clear separation between family and work, and but this needs to change. And I think if I can speak from my experience about belonging as a international, as an immigrant, as a half mixed race, kid, and so on. Belonging has been a big theme in my life, and I definitely, if I am honest, and I can raise my hand, I can say, as a leader, if I look back, I can certainly say what has driven the creation of my businesses was belonging. And if I dare even wilder, I would say it was about finding love. It was about making sure that, we love what we do. We utilize our skill sets. We are, different, but we can bring all of that unapologetically on the table and be able to lead from a deeper place, from a place where alignment and authenticity are okay, if not encouraged. And we do have a question from Trevor, which I'm going to show in a moment. So, how does compassion and love work in a post-COVID virtual world? What a great question. Can we really offer it over Zoom and Teams? Wow, that's a juicy question for Yvonne.
And you know what? We get asked it all the time. It's a great question. It's a great question. So I can give you I'm going to give you the answer because I'm just going to do it. Just throw it out there. So I don't know a lot about quantum physics, but I know enough to understand that energy really matters. And the information field, the quantum field, people feel our energy. You can watch a video on TED Talks or YouTube and be taken to tears. And you're not in front of that person. You're not in the audience. We do a lot of virtual global classes around the world with leaders from different countries, different continents, all the time. And they will say at the end, I just need to stay in touch with all of you, and it matters. And we've become close friends, and they've never met face to face. I have clients we've had for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. I met them for the first time face to face, like a couple months ago. But there's a connection, like there's like this huge hug that happens, So it is completely possible to create meaningful, compassionate relationships and work in a Zoom and Teams environment. But it does mean slowing down. It does mean being intentional, and it does mean being really present. And it's just a practice. It's a practice. It's very important.
Thank you. Thank you. And I can testify that for sure. Most of my clients are from different continents. My team is from different continents, but the love and support that there is there when we connect, probably sometimes better than friends at times, how supported I feel when I'm going through a difficult situation that they intimately know that a friend or family member wouldn't be able to relate to as well. So thank you, Trevor. I hope this answers your question. If not, then do. He answered. He commented saying, "I love that." So let me show that as well. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for your question. And I think on LinkedIn, we cannot see that you're online, but if you do have questions, you can post them at any time and we will share them at appropriate times. And I would love to close today's conversation with Yvonne. I'm sure you have all sorts of questions popping up in your head if you're watching on replay or if you're watching slightly later than when we started this. I really loved how, you have created a handbook, I will call it, for a new world leader. And I certainly recommend you check Yvonne's books on changeinnovators.com, and I will share the comments on the information on the comments after a live show. And really somebody who wants to instill accountability in their culture and truly make an impact, this is a handbook for them. So I want to ask Yvonne, as we close this conversation, on how can you personally tell a leader has done their work, their individuation work. And individuation we refer to as Carl Jung's term about flourishing, about self-actualizing, about really becoming authentic in their work, because not everywhere we can be really authentic. Exactly the question you asked, how much of you people know at work about you, right? And normally we show a tiny aspect of us, an acceptable professional aspect of us at work. But I'm sure you have more keen, experienced eyes. So as you see your leaders go through your programs and grow, what are the signs that you know and you notice have happened to a new world leader? Because everybody can be trained on this. Everyone, as long as it's a lifetime commitment, as you mentioned, can go through this path, can go and unfold their individuation path. How would you notice, how would you know somebody's on their journey from your keen eyes?
It's different. It's different for each person. I don't think there's one or two things. I mean, there's some signs that they would share with us, like, I'm practicing this new way, and oh my goodness, like, I couldn't believe the results I got in a conversation yesterday with so and so. I would never have done that in the past, but now I'm trying this and I can't get over the results I got. I think that's part of it. I think people that, when as a coach, when you've got a client who really wants to roll up their sleeves and do some work. But I never really think about that in terms of that, because I practice really, really hard to stay out of judgment, and I think that has a tendency for me to kind of go, well, you're getting it and you're not, and I just think we all get there in our own way. I think the hardest part for people is to get past the point of saying, what I've done in the past is not working and it won't work in the future. I need to be vulnerable enough to open up to do some of this hard work. And that doesn't mean, like, we don't encourage people in the group cohorts to share stuff, and it's not about that. But it's really about, am I willing to look in the mirror and do that work? And it's very personal. It's very personal. So, and in our world, all of our programs include ongoing coaching. And weird enough, but we actually never let go of a client. What that means is they're part of our leadership community. They get coaching when they need it and want it at no additional cost. That can be like, we get people who phone us and say, I haven't talked to you in 5 years, but oh, by the way, can we chat? I got an issue. I just need an outside objective person to kind of run some ideas by. But that's just what we want to do. It's who we are. And because this is a commitment to changing the corporate world, and it's been a commitment for 23 years. New World Leadership was trademarked 12 years ago, and I got laughed at, absolutely laughed at. What are you doing, New World? That sounds like new agey. Is that like esoteric stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. It just seems like the right word. And here today, it's like people are like, New World Leadership, we need that. I'm like, it's been, so I don't think there's one answer to the question. I think it's really unique for people. And I think people are ready. People want relief. People want to care about each other. We just got to give them the space to do it. And that is human. It's about making real human connection. And when we make real human connection, we're unstoppable. We can do anything. Teams can create anything when there's real human connection.
Wow. What an answer and what a turnaround. So it's not about looking for signs, it's not about skills, it's about really, as a leader, being in the non-judgment place and the detachment and serving honesty, not just to others, but to ourselves as well, by looking in the mirror. What a finale. Thank you so much for your time today, Yvonne. If you did like the live show with Yvonne today, please do visit changeinnovators.com. I will share some of the details on how to connect with Yvonne and find out more about her incredible work with global leaders and her handbooks, as well as I call them. They're books, but they are really handbooks. They will take you step by step on how to unfold and start practicing the accountability model within your work, but also the change of consciousness and mindsets. But of course, why not join her leadership program and actually experience coaching one-on-one with her colleagues who are also amazing, and have met some of them, and then create New World Leadership. Now, it's not a woo-woo word anymore. It's really about getting in touch with the goo of every leader, creating that space of belonging and safety, and creating unprecedented accountability culture and results. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for spending this afternoon instead of walking outside in sunny England, I hear, in Cornwall, to be with us today. And I have been incredibly honored to learn from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Christina.
Thank you. And if the audience has any more questions, feel free to put them as comments if you're seeing this afterwards, and we will make sure Yvonne gets to answer them as well. Thanks a lot, and take good care and have a beautiful summer. And I hope we can meet when I'm back in England. Thank you.